What you are about to discover is not recent speculation, nor is it a consolation created to calm troubled minds. We are talking about something that has been deliberately hidden, manipulated, erased, and reshaped for generations, all with a single purpose: to prevent you from knowing. The silence surrounding this truth is no coincidence. There is a profound reason why it has been suppressed. And perhaps now is the time when the pieces are beginning to fall into place. Be alert. The understanding that unfolds from this point forward may completely change your perception of what is real. From the earliest years of your life, you have been taught to see yourself as a tiny being, wandering aimlessly in a meaningless universe. This reductionist view has been imposed so forcefully that over time it has come to seem natural. But it is a sham. You have never been just a body. You are not a cosmic accident. Within you dwells something that defies all known structures. Within you is the divine. This discovery has been systematically covered up. Governments, religious leaders, entire institutions have risen up around the mission of ensuring that this knowledge never reaches you. Why? Because a person who recognizes their own divine nature cannot be dominated. An awakened mind does not blindly obey. For centuries, the idea that the divine essence resides within every human being has been treated as dangerous. This is because it undermines the authority of any system of control. If there is no need for a mediator between you and the sacred, then temples, thrones, and scriptures lose their power over your consciousness. This understanding is not new. It echoes from ancient times in occult spiritual schools, Gnostic traditions, Eastern mystical currents, and forgotten doctrines that predate any organized religion. And they all point to a common point: the visible world is not as you have been taught. Matter as we know it is an illusion, a carefully designed prison to keep you anesthetized. The God presented as omnipotent, distant, and unquestionable is, in fact, an artificial creation. The source of everything is not outside you. It is your own consciousness. Among those who dared to teach this were the Gnostics. They believed that the physical universe was the work of a deceitful entity, the demiurge, a false creator convinced of his divinity who kept humanity chained to ignorance. For them, salvation would not come through dogma, but through an inner revelation, a remembrance of the divine spark that each person carries within. This knowledge was unbearable for structures that depended on blind obedience. Therefore, persecutions were launched. Writings were burned, voices were silenced, all to erase any trace of this liberating wisdom. Among the texts that were eliminated, the Gospel of Thomas caused particular discomfort. In it, Jesus did not present himself as a figure of worship, but as someone who pointed inward. He said that when human beings find themselves, they become greater than the world. This teaching subverts the entire logic of spiritual hierarchies. But the same principle can be found in other corners of the world. In the Vedic tradition, the Upanishads clearly state, Tattvam Asi, you are that. The divine is not on another plane, reserved for the few. It pulsates at the center of your being. Over time, these truths were distorted. What should have liberated became a tool of domination. Doctrines became shackles. You were trained not to question, to accept as absolute truth what was handed to you without room for reflection. Someone who understands their true nature cannot be manipulated. Those who recognize that they are part of infinite consciousness do not submit to external authorities. Neither governments, nor priests, nor artificial rules have any power over them. That is why they buried everything. Since time immemorial, you have been conditioned to see yourself as needing guidance, as if you were incapable of accessing what is most sacred on your own. But there is something that no one has had the courage to say. You never needed to be saved. You never needed permission. The answer you sought was already there, within you, all along. You are the divine you seek. And throughout your life, they tried to make you look outside, when the answer has always been within you. The time has come to recover what has been hidden. In the ebook, The Forbidden Name of Jesus, you will have access to revelations torn from history. It is available in the first pinned comment. This is where everything starts to make more sense. Nothing around you was created by chance. Every structure, every idea, every concept you have been exposed to since early childhood has served a single purpose: to keep you imprisoned in a distorted perception of reality. They told you that you were just a body, a social function, a piece on a board. They imposed routines, hierarchies, and beliefs as if they were natural. But no one taught you to ask, who is behind all this? Who benefits from my ignorance? Schools do not encourage questioning, but rather obedience. The education system has become a factory of repetition. Religions insist that the sacred is separate, unattainable, and that to get closer to it, one must follow rules and submit. Governments feed the idea that without them, you would be vulnerable, unable to survive on your own. The media distracts, diverts, anesthetizes, all so that you never discover that there is a game being played, and that you were never invited to learn the rules. Ancient civilizations not only perceived this manipulation, but also dared to denounce it. Many identified the demiurge, this false creator, not as a mythological being, but as an invisible structure that feeds off your conformity. It is blind belief, passive acceptance, and the absence of questioning that keep the system running. Every time you submit without thinking, you reinforce the foundations of this invisible prison. This is why Gnostic knowledge has been persecuted so fervently. Because it promised no future rewards and demanded no loyalty to institutions, it pointed inward, and once someone begins to see beyond the illusion, the prison begins to crumble. That is when the guardians of the lie react with force. Throughout history, those who dared to awaken faced severe consequences. The fate of the Gnostics was sealed by fire and sword. Later, the Cathars, who insisted that the spirit was free, were exterminated in bloody crusades. The Bogomils, with their ideas of spiritual freedom, were destroyed, not because they were wrong, but because they represented a real threat. An awakened population is uncontrollable, and that, to the rulers of the world, is intolerable. You never really belonged to this world. It was shaped to make you obedient, but what they have tried so hard to hide is that this prison only works if you believe in it. The moment you start to question it is the moment the cracks appear. And when you stop identifying with this charade, you become dangerous to the system. Have you ever wondered why no one ever told you this? The reason is simple. This information has been systematically eliminated. Those who built the foundations of the modern world not only controlled resources, territories, and narratives, they redesigned the very structure of knowledge. They chose what would be remembered and what would be erased. And everything that could liberate the human mind was buried. The early Gnostics were not a simple religious sect. They were thinkers, seekers, transmitters of a truth that did not serve the empires. They spoke of inner freedom, of direct access to the sacred. They did not ask for submission, but for awareness. And that was enough to make them targets. In the year 325, during the Council of Nicaea, spirituality was institutionalized. What had previously been a personal path of connection was transformed into state doctrine. Texts that pointed to the divine spark in human beings were destroyed. Gospels such as those of Thomas, Mary, and Judas were considered threats. All that remained was what could be used as a tool of obedience. The repression never ceased. It only changed its face. The Cathars were exterminated in France. The Bogomils were erased from the records. Alchemists and mystics were burned in public squares. Today, the persecution is more subtle. Those who think differently are labeled, discredited, ridiculed. The message is the same. Don't think, just accept. But the truth has not disappeared. It has survived in forgotten manuscripts, in symbols carved in stone, in traditions that have never been completely silenced. And now it is resurfacing. The forbidden name of Jesus is part of this rescue, but it will not be available for long. Only a few copies remain. The link is in the first pinned comment. Those in power have always feared knowledge because they know that a conscious humanity does not need to be led. That is why they erased the past. That is why they shaped your mind not to see. But the time of blindness is coming to an end. It all starts with how they defined you. Before you even learned to speak, they had already established your identity. They gave you a name, assigned you a country, a religion, a gender, an origin, and they said, "This is who you are." This process, although it seems harmless, is a trap, because when you cling to a label, it becomes an invisible cell, and that is exactly how they shaped your perception, by making you believe that you are what they said you are. But look closely. You are not the name that appears on documents. You are not the profession you practice. You are not your body, your political ideas, or the possessions you own. These are temporary elements, roles you have been led to play. What lies behind all this is something infinitely broader, pure consciousness. And the effort to prevent you from realizing this has been carefully orchestrated. The limitation does not stop at identity. Your senses, although valuable, have also been used as bars. Sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste have become the only windows through which you have learned to recognize the world. Sensory experience has been treated as the only valid form of reality. Anything that deviates from this has come to be seen as delusion or fantasy. But this contradicts what ancient civilizations, explorers of consciousness, and even modern science have been pointing out. Matter is malleable. Reality, as we know it, functions as a code. It presents itself according to the filters installed in our minds, and if you believe only what your senses perceive, you are trapped in a simulation, an illusion carefully constructed to appear absolute. In this scenario, keeping you distracted is essential. Questioning becomes dangerous, so they flood your life with urgent tasks, empty debates, crisis bulletins, unpayable debts, and excessive entertainment. When some unrest arises, they offer superficial solutions that only muffle the discomfort. Pills, motivational slogans, escapism, all so that you willingly accept your cell. But among all the strategies used to keep your consciousness asleep, one stands out for its efficiency: fear. Since childhood, you have been taught to fear everything that deviates from the norm. Fear of rejection, failure, divine punishment, death. Under the influence of fear, you adapt, retreat, and remain silent. You accept rules you don't understand just to feel safe. And so, little by little, you give up your freedom. But this fear, like prison, is not real. It was induced, planted and cultivated within you so that you would never dare to cross the walls that limited your vision. Because once you start to see beyond, everything falls apart. This structure has flaws, small cracks that become visible when your perception begins to change. By refusing the roles imposed on you, by doubting what they say is absolute, something inside you shifts. And it is in this shift that the key to freedom begins to appear. You don't have to remain trapped in the image they have built of you, nor should you accept as truth what your eyes see or what society preaches as unquestionable. There is something more, and from the moment this becomes clear, the game changes. Other questions then arise: how to break free from this conditioning, How can you escape an illusion built since the first days of your life? The answer is not in believing new promises. It is in seeing what has always been there. The process of liberation does not require physical escape. It is not about abandoning everything and leaving. It is a change in the way you look at things. The cell only imprisons you as long as you do not recognize that you are in it. The first step is to deny what does not represent your essence. You are not the role you play. It is not your flag, your past, or your titles. These are external shells. They are forms that have distanced you from yourself. Underneath all this is the same consciousness that animated the ancient seekers, the silenced mystics, the wise men persecuted for speaking inconvenient truths. And it is to this consciousness that you must return. This knowledge is accessible now, but it will not remain so forever. The material contained in the forbidden name of Jesus brings together fragments that escaped historical censorship. They are pieces of a puzzle that, when complete, reveal a very different picture from what has been taught. Access is still available in the pinned comment. But it is not enough to know. You must go further. All certainties must be challenged. Every belief must be examined. Where did your ideas about the world come from? Who defined what is right or wrong? Who benefits when you remain silent and just follow? The system loses power when you refuse to respond automatically. It only has power over minds that recognize it as legitimate, and from the moment you realize this, authority begins to crumble. The time has come to reclaim your mind. The incessant flow of stimuli and information is designed to prevent you from accessing your inner silence. That is why they have marginalized practices that lead to clarity. Meditation, expanded states of consciousness, isolation retreats. They reconnect you to what is eternal. All authentic masters knew this. Real power has never been outside. It will never depend on rituals, temples, or leaders. It has always been internal. Because the real prison was never made of bars, it was made of thoughts. Something begins to dissolve when you realize that the prison was never real. It's as if a fog dissipates before your eyes. The game of appearances loses its power. Political disputes sound staged. Headlines, repetitive scripts. Fear, once paralyzing, reveals itself as a tool to keep everything under control. And then, understanding knocks on the door. None of this was solid. The cell was always open, but you believed you were locked in. When that belief falls, the structure collapses. The veil is torn, and with it comes what they could never take from you, the power to see. And that's where the real risk begins for them, because a consciousness that recognizes its freedom does not bow down, does not follow orders without purpose, and does not feed structures that serve domination. Do you really think that those who run this system just stand by, waiting for people to wake up? Of course not. There is a constant, silent, and sophisticated effort to keep you exactly where you are, distracted, fearful, dependent. Control is not exercised by force alone. It infiltrates your very perception of reality. That is the real battlefield, what you believe to be real. Book burning and the persecution of heretics were just the beginning. The mechanism has evolved. Suppression has become more sophisticated. First, the manipulation of the past. Who shapes the records of history? Who decides what will be taught, what will be erased, and what will be turned into legend? Those who win wars, rule empires, and finance the media. Entire peoples have been eliminated, not just with weapons but with silence. Traditions that celebrated consciousness and self-knowledge were labeled myths or superstitions. Deep knowledge has been reduced to harmless allegories that do not threaten the status quo. Even so, fragments have survived. Clues remain, signs left in symbols, forgotten manuscripts, and teachings preserved on the margins of society. and those who dare to look beyond the official versions discover that there is much more than what has been allowed to be taught. Meanwhile, the dominant discourse insists everything you are can be explained by biology. Your mind is merely the result of electrical impulses in a brain that shuts down when you die. Nothing else exists beyond what can be measured in a laboratory. But if that were really true, why do spiritual elites, secret orders, and even government agencies invest so much time and resources studying what they say does not exist? If occult knowledge were harmless, why does the Vatican keep thousands of documents inaccessible to the public? Why are discoveries about consciousness and psychic phenomena quickly discredited, even when they come from renowned scientists? The answer is disconcerting. The truth sets you free, and a free mind is uncontrollable. Then came the hijacking of spirituality. Over the centuries, what was once an inner path has been turned into an instrument of domination. True spirituality is revolutionary because it reveals that no one is separate from the sacred. But the institutions created in the name of faith quickly realized that this truth was too dangerous to be shared. The great masters of history did not demand obedience. None of them built temples with rigid hierarchies. Their words always pointed inward. But after their deaths, their messages were edited, adapted, and reconfigured to consolidate power. What was liberation became submission. The proposal of direct reconnection with the source was replaced by mechanical rituals and unquestionable dogmas. Intermediaries were imposed between you and your own essence. Because a human being who recognizes themselves as an expression of the divine does not need spiritual leaders or institutional approval. This is the kind of truth that is stored in the forbidden name of Jesus, and it will not be available forever. There is a limited time to access the content that they tried to erase from history. The opportunity remains in the first pinned comment. Finally, the false division between science and spirit. They sold the idea that you can only choose one side, that either you believe in the physical and rational world or you lose yourself in unfounded beliefs. This separation, however, has been strategically fueled. A society that denies everything it cannot see is an easy society to control. But there is a contradiction that jumps out at you. While you are taught to ignore any idea that goes beyond matter, the real power holders dive deeper and deeper into studies of the mind, subtle energy, and possibilities beyond time and space. If all this were just fantasy, why so much effort to hide, ridicule, and bury this knowledge? If science finally recognized what the ancients have always claimed, that matter is only a superficial expression of reality, that consciousness shapes the world around it, and that everything we call real is just a layer superimposed on something much greater, the entire edifice of control would collapse. The elite knew that sooner or later some would wake up. So they planned a sophisticated containment strategy. Present a new prison, camouflaged under the appearance of freedom. Modern doctrines emerged with seductive rhetoric. Many movements touted as liberating were constructed to appear revolutionary, when in fact they merely changed the chains. Instead of breaking the cycle, they create new myths, illusory concepts, and empty promises. The new strategy is not to hide everything, but to flood the mind with so many contradictory versions that the truth is lost in the noise. And in this confusion, you are led to believe that you are choosing, when in fact you remain imprisoned. The most ingenious trick has always been to make you defend the system that imprisons you. This does not happen through direct imposition, but through the silent repetition of programming. It is people close to you, educators, friends, relatives, who unconsciously keep this structure alive. Not out of malice, but because they too have been conditioned to accept it as absolute truth. Still, the truth persists. It resurfaces like water seeping through cracks. No matter how many libraries have been destroyed or how many records have been erased, knowledge always finds a way back. And it's happening again. Long-banned manuscripts are reappearing. Questions that were once forbidden are being asked again. What was tried to be buried begins to emerge, and those who have always manipulated this scenario know very well what this means. The foundation of their power is threatened. More and more people are beginning to reject the lies. The masks are falling. The old structure can no longer sustain itself in the face of the awakened gaze, and the more one looks closely, the more the cracks increase. This is not the first time that collective awakening has threatened control. Ancient societies held parts of this knowledge and organized entire cultures based on it. Peoples such as the Egyptians, the Sumerians, and the early mystics knew that consciousness was the central point of creation, and every time this understanding gained strength, it was brutally erased. This time, however, the movement is different. The truth is spreading at a speed that the old machinery cannot contain. They no longer have the means to silence everything. And no matter how much they try to disguise it with censorship, distractions, or fear, they can no longer hide the fragility of the illusion. The only thing that kept this theater going was the belief of the masses. And now that you've realized it, collapse is inevitable. The more people wake up, the less power they have, and at that point, everything changes. If this content resonated with you and you would like to support the production of more materials like this, please consider contributing any amount. This directly strengthens the continuity of this work. Thank you for being with us.